Hi there. Just wanted to do a little addendum video to the last one I did. And because I've been thinking about it, you can look at it in so many different ways, can't you? And I mean, that video, the one I just did, wasn't meant to be to critique any of the work that Professor Quigley has done. And it's all excellent. And I understand that in the adversarial system, you're required and you've got to do it as a matter of strategy. It's a fight, you know. It's not a it's not a s- the nature of the trial isn't looking for the truth. Actually, you might say it is, but it's not. That's the structure of that adversarial system. If you can win with lies, as we've seen, you know, they won with lies. They won with nothing but lies. They didn't win with half truths. Everything that the prosecution's case was based on is a lie, is untrue, is unreal. It's totally unreal. It's untrue to the degree that the events that the 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 crimes didn't even exist. That's how bad it can be. So in that context, for a defense strategy, part of it to be to say, well, look, you've presented this roster chart. Now we're going to attack it in every possible way. And we're going to say, well, why didn't you consider these events as suspicious if you considered those ones? And I understand the strategy for doing that. I understand the strategy for saying, well, you've misled the jury by saying, I know this wasn't done in the trial, but you've misled the jury, as Professor O'Quigley and others have said, obviously Professor Richard Gill as well, to say, well, look, you haven't fairly looked at all the other nurses, or where are the doctors on the charts, etc. You haven't you haven't given an extra weighting, as it were, to Lucy Letby's conspicuous high number of shifts that she did, many or most of them overnight, that she was specifically called in when there were high acuity babies on the unit, and she always would come in, or nearly always would come in. I think this is what from Professor Gill's one of his videos, is that she was there is a correlation that she was following. It's not that the sickness or the deaths of the babies were following loosely. It's the other way around. It's because she's being called in to look after them. So yes, you will see a kind of a correlation with a greater likelihood of her being around when higher acuity babies are there. And because of the systemic failure of the system of the unit, that's going to necessarily result in a correlation between her as a particular nurse being around for more deaths than certain other nurses. And obviously you have to build in the fact that a lot of them aren't doing anything like the number of hours that she is as well. It's this weird position that you, in this adversarial system, in which you've got to fight on certain battlefields that shouldn't exist. I mean, the battlefield of fighting, of saying, well, you haven't looked at all these other possibly suspicious events, is to give ground, in a sense, and be on this battlefield that you wouldn't want to choose if you were just looking at the truth. And that battlefield is to say, well, yeah, we're kind of tacitly acknowledging that there are suspicious events, and there could be somebody doing something. And this is saliently where it desperately went wrong, didn't it? For the defence in the original trial was to kind of go with the idea that, and I know other people looked at this in other ways, that Myers and co were saying, well, you haven't proved that Lucy Letby did anything with those TPN bags, but really their defence wasn't putting anything up against the prosecution to say, well, it didn't happen at all. It's just that, well, you haven't proved that Lucy Letby actually did that, but they could, allowing for the gap, for the jury to sense the gap, to say, well, hold on a minute, the defence are kind of saying here, well, they're not really fighting it, they're not knocking it out of the park, the idea of deliberate tampering. They're kind of saying you can't blame this person. Well, why is she here then? There's no one else in the frame. Well, if we're going to blame anyone for it, if they're allowing a gap of the potential for it to happen, there's only one person we're looking at, and that's devastating. That's a catastrophe for Lucy Letby, and that's one of the principal failures of the original defence is that they had to have somebody to fight tooth and nail in that adversarial system to say, well, those immunoassays are absolutely not proof of deliberate tampering or exogenous insulin into the TPN bags. So yeah, as a bit of a conclude, I'll wrap this up now. Following on from that last video, what I want to say is I can see the adversarial system, and that is part of the problem, and it puts you in a false position because you're not just going after the truth. You've got to score as many points as you can against the other side. So in this case, you attack that roster chart in from every possible angle you can. And if you were just to say, oh well, look, there are no suspicious events. They haven't proved. They haven't determined. And there's been some great comments. I've been reading all the comments of the last video. I think Kev says as well that Professor Hutton said, we need a definition. We need a definition of what is a suspicious event, and so there wasn't one then. There wasn't one throughout the trial. There is no definition. It's like I said in the last video. It's a mental construct inside the head of Breary, which is then added to by Evans, or it's fulfilled, as it were, by Evans, by him coming up with the modus of the attack, which he can change at will and still get it through, still get it over the line. And then the police sticking those two sides together and just building it up into this utterly cynical affair. It's despicable. So yeah, I was saying what Kev said in that comment. There wasn't a definition then of a suspicious event. There isn't one now, and there's never going to be one, because it's obviously, clearly, utterly subjective, and it's based on, well, what is it based on? It partially could be based on the fact that those doctors are incredibly limited in their knowledge, but it's not just that. It's the fact that they're hiding things as well, things that they know they've done and their colleagues have done, and they're operating as a gang. So just for example, going back to Baby K again, we've heard Dr. Shu Lee's version of the failures of Dr. Jayaram in that instance. Now, what would he say about them? Would he say, no, that's absolutely fine to use those tubes and use the capnograph in that way? And how would he contest it? We're never going to hear that other side of it. So, and it would be awful. And he'll never be pressed to justify it either, ever. So there was another comment from Bernie there as well, just springing to mind, is that Bernie Rowlands on the last video was that two things can be correct at the same time, I think he was saying. And the idea that, yes, you could have gone, should have gone, or could still go after that roster chart in those ways that Professor O'Quigley demonstrates in the 19 Nurses video. And in an adversarial system, if you could go after it in that way, why wouldn't you? It's this thing that I find it very hard to grasp. If there are no crimes, then if there are no crimes, if all the deaths have got explicable reasons, as the panel have laid out, then in a sense that relegates any and all statistical arguments. It knocks them all. I'm not saying they're not important as well, but it trumps them essentially. That's the first line, isn't there? Because that first line says, well, you don't need to look any further. You don't need to consider who's on duty, but because there are no crimes. You don't need to think about it anymore, I suppose. But I don't know what the totality of the application to the CCRC is. Will it be just you throw everything at it? Because it's all about process as opposed to truth. This whole system, process is supreme. Truth is not supreme. Justice is not supreme. Process is supreme in the eyes of the people administrating this so-called justice system. So you've got to attack process then, and if part of that process is the fraud of that document and how it affected the jury, then yeah, attack it in every way you possibly can. But kind of puts you in this kind of false position of sort of tacitly agreeing with that. Oh, well, maybe you just didn't. Maybe there was something suspicious there or adverse. I know Professor Quigley used synonymously the terms adverse events and suspicious events, but it's all, what, as I said, who's having the suspicions and why are they having them? It's a real knot once you're in this adversarial system in which the fight, if you just hold to truth, you could end up, it might not help you. and that's devastating. That's a devastating realization that the truth won't save you in that adversarial system. It won't. It's just a fight. It's a fight in every possible way you can do it. But I'm not saying the other system's going to be perfect either, but there's something, I don't know, it's all horrific. It's frightening how it can happen and how it can victimize people. So because of that, that's why that recalcitrant and degenerate court of appeal need to be forced, kicked into action, into changing, or just get rid of a lot of them and get some decent people there that aren't going to put process ahead of people's lives, essentially, and their ego or their false ideas about protecting the institution above people's lives. Thank you.